In the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints simply cannot miss. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, with all of the noise around quarterback, it's a little suspicious that some quarterback names haven't popped up at all. We'll take a look at second and third round prospects that can make or break this New Orleans Saints 2025 draft class. And speaking of that 2025 draft class, the New Orleans Saints have no choice but to nail this class. We got that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by the new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada player of the game later on in the show. The New Orleans Saints must hit when it comes to this 2025 NFL draft class. This class is too important to flub. Can't botch it, can't blunder it, cannot miss in this year's NFL draft. It doesn't mean that you have to go 9 for 9 on your 9 selections, but walking away with several players that are going to be considered starters in their future is going to be major for this New Orleans Saints team. I've decided that I'm no longer going into the 2025 season looking at it as a 17-game season, and instead, I'm looking at this next 34-game season. The New Orleans Saints in 2025 and 2026, this feels like a process for New Orleans. And even though they're going to say that they're going to compete, they want to win their division, all those other things, Cam Jordan talking about being one of the top 2 teams in the NFL if this team is healthy, that's exactly the stuff that they should be saying out loud. I'm never going to take away from any of that. Because as Lance Moore talked about in the Saints squad earlier on this week, every time as a player he walked into those team meetings and they talk about winning Super Bowls, all those other things, you leave that meeting believing that. And you should leave that meeting believing that as a player. I do not get on this podcast every day and say, I'm going to do an okay job. Or I'm going to come out here and be the worst podcaster today, right? I'm not going to do that ever. I promise you that. And that's exactly what you should want from me. That's exactly what you should expect from every person that's doing a job somewhere that they believe they can be the best person doing that job or doing their job. The New Orleans Saints, their players, their coaches, front office, all that, they need to be believing that as well. However, the front office, coaching staff, those guys might also be looking behind closed doors and saying, okay, here's where we truly are. And I think the New Orleans Saints are wise enough to do that. And when they do that, I'm sure what they're doing here is looking at the process of the next couple of years. It's why I thought that the Kellen Moore hire is one that will come with patience. And that was one of the things that I said, that in order for that hire to really work and be maximized, it's got to come with patience. No one is going to be able to hold Kellen Moore's feet to the flame after just 1 year and say whether or not he's a good head coach. I guess you could walk away saying he is a good head coach, but you certainly can't walk away saying that he's not, unless things go absolutely catastrophic, right? Infighting and divisions in the locker room and all those other things, right? If he's Urban Meyering all over the place, and there's a very, very different situation at hand, of course. But I can't think of 2 more different personalities at head coach than Urban Meyer and Kellen Moore. I think the New Orleans Saints are going to be just fine from that perspective. And so with that, patience is the virtue around the New Orleans Saints. And a big part of trying to maximize where it is that they're headed in their future is by maximizing and getting this draft class right. Doug Mouton and I were over on WLAE yesterday. We did a show with Eric Asher. And one of the things that Doug mentioned was that this team should go into this draft not at all worried about position, but instead drafting the best player, the best athlete, the best talent, the best playmaker available. I completely agree with that. I have different and differing opinions in terms of how to maximize that than maybe most do. I think you should go with the best playmaker available in the first round. So that might limit your positional, I don't want to say positional value, but that might limit like what positions you're willing to make that investment, right? Can you consider an interior offensive lineman a playmaker? Maybe not at number 9 overall. But then after that, I think you are looking for things that get a little bit more specific. Best player available, best athlete available, best blocker available, things like that. And so I think that there's different levels of things that you look at from a contribution standpoint that end up making sense based on the value of where you are in this year's draft. But here's the truth of this year's draft. It's not the strongest draft class in terms of superstar potential, but it is a very reliable draft class in terms of starter potential. And those two things are different. There might be 9 or 10 first round grades in this year's draft class, but that doesn't mean that there's only 9 or 10 good players. In this draft, it feels like you're going to be able to get guys that in other drafts would have been selected in the 2nd or 3rd rounds in the 4th or 5th rounds because of how deep some of these classes go. We're talking about potentially 30 draftable running backs in this class, a ridiculously talented tight end group, a ridiculously talented interior offensive line group that doesn't start at the top of the draft and might not even start until the 2nd round, outside of maybe a guy like Tyler Booker who could sneak into the bottom of the 1st. But then you have really strong interior offensive linemen throughout the rest of that draft class, or not the rest of the draft class, but like throughout the rest of day 2, early day 3. Let me make sure I'm being realistic here. Then you look at defensive tackle, deep. Edge rusher, deep, especially if you're looking for the smaller, speedier edge rushers, which I think the New Orleans Saints should be in the market for, even though they re-signed and brought back Chase Young. I do still think you're okay going out and grabbing a stand-up pass rush specialist for 2025, knowing that they can then step into a bigger role beginning in 2026, depending upon how the roster flips. And so this draft has to be with that in mind. This draft has to be, you're not making selections in 2025 just for 2025. Ideally, you're revamping your 2017 situation to where you drafted players in 2017 that were contributing for you in 2020, 2021, 2022, and so on, right? And of course, help to build what should have been a Super Bowl team in 2018 if one thing had gone differently. And heck, maybe even in 2017 if one thing had gone differently. But that one thing was more in control for the New Orleans Saints in 2018's one thing. Certainly was. I'm sorry to bring up bad memories. So I'm not saying that this draft class has to be, will be, or even can be the 2017 draft class. But the approach that led them to that draft class needs to be taken again here in 2025. Sorry, almost at 2018 again. Now I'm scarred because I brought up 2018. But that, I think, has to be the approach going into this draft. And this draft class allows you to be able to do that. I was asked on radio a great question. Do I believe that the New Orleans Saints and the decision makers have the ability to be able to maximize this draft class? And I do, because they have. Last year was a home run in Taliesin Fuanga in the 1st round. Brian Brzee, to me, is at least a triple, but probably a home run too, right? He was the best defensive lineman on the team last year, or interior defensive lineman on the team last year. Then you look at guys like Chris Olave, Trevor Penning, who are bona fide starters for you. And I understand that the jury's still out on Penning and everybody's trying to figure out, but the switch to right tackle might have saved his career, might have saved his trajectory. Then you look at other players like Trey Hendrickson, Zach Bond, Caden Ellis. Those weren't failures of those drafting. Those were failures of the coaching staff for not getting those guys out on the field. So for New Orleans, yeah, I think that they have what they need in terms of the decision makers to be able to make those selections. And now they have a coaching staff that should be able to maximize these guys. And they're aided by where I have the most faith in this draft process, which is the player population. The draft pool is outstanding. And so with all of that, the New Orleans Saints have no choice, and really no excuse but to get this draft class right. And if they don't, that's going to be a major, major miss on the New Orleans Saints' part. Coming up next, one of the big reasons why I don't think that they'll miss is because of how absolutely loaded day 2 is in the draft. We'll get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Every week, we're taking a look at a draft prospect that I think stands apart from the rest. And I want to go back to earlier this week I want to highlight as our player of the week this week, Trey Amos, the cornerback out of Ole Miss. To me, a solid starter immediately in this draft. Very reminiscent in terms of his length, his play style, his aggressive ability, and his ability at the catch point of Paulson Adebo, who the New Orleans Saints just lost to free agency. So if the Saints were looking for a starting corner, they want somebody that's going to be rough and rugged and be able to get that ball back into the hands of the offense. Trey Amos is our player of the week this week. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer with confidence, and you can do the same in the new Nissan Armada and all of their other outstanding vehicles as well. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go and find your next big adventure. Shop today at nissanusa.com. All right, family. One of the big reasons why I have such high hopes for this draft class is simply because of how good the players are in this year's draft. We've been catching up on film and all those other things. We'll have a lot of film studies coming out to our insider program, which if you'd like to join, especially heading up to the NFL draft, good opportunity to get some inside insight, as well as film breakdowns, which I can't do on audio and I can't do on the YouTube page. So if you want some film breakdowns for draft prospects, text Who Dat 504-285-7473 and join our insider program. You can also click the link in the description as well for that. But here's what I want to go through today. As I talk about these great day 2 prospects, round 2 and round 3, I wanted to highlight a few of the prospects that helped me feel that way. So just as a quick refresher, the New Orleans Saints have 9 selections in this year's NFL draft, 4 of which their first round pick, their second round pick, and their 2 third round picks. They picked up an extra one in that Marshawn Lattimore trade last year at the trade deadline. Those 4 selections are all within the top 100 of this year's draft. That's pick number 9, pick number 41, pick number 40, pick number 71, and pick number 93. So I want to focus on 40, 71, and 93 for this part of today's show. We're going to take a look at the deeper parts of this draft as well, because there's also still solid options in the 4th round. But I wanted to take a look at kind of second round, early third, late third, different options. And I wrote some articles on this over at louisianasports.net. If you want to catch kind of the written versions of this with some highlights embedded and stuff like that as well, you can go and check it out. But I want to lead off with Trey Amos, who is our Nissan Armada player of the week this week, because I broke him down in an earlier episode when we were kind of doing a this or that. And the idea was, would you rather Will Johnson or would you rather Trey Amos? Now, to clarify my position on that, Will Johnson is going to be a Pro Bowl talent in the NFL if he can stay healthy and if he can answer the speed questions that are just there because he didn't get to participate during the draft process. And so the idea is, if you're not comfortable with Will Johnson in the first round at number 9 overall because of the injury history, turf toe took away his second half of his season last year, and then the hamstring injury, which always feels like when rather than if in terms of re-injury and all those other things, kept him limited throughout the pre-draft process here. But if you're okay with all that, you feel good about it, then Will Johnson at number 9 is a home run. But if you don't feel okay about it, Trey Amos at number 40 in the second round, absolute home run. 6 foot, 200, nearly 200 pounds. I think he probably tests lighter than he plays, but 4.43 speed on top of all of it. Just a long, athletic, physical playmaker who goes up and makes plays at the catch point as well. He's somebody that I really, really like as a potential lockdown corner that you can get at pick number 40. So a guy like Trey Amos, if you were to take somebody in the first round at pick 90, that's an immediate impact player for you. A Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, a Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, Ashton Jeanty, the running back out of Boise State, or you went and surprised everybody, which I still think is unlikely, and take a quarterback at number 9, then you turn around and you get a Trey Amos, bang, you've got another massive starter potential player to add over to the defensive side. Or you take Tetairoa McMillan because you're not so concerned about the rising concerns around him that I'm still not completely convinced aren't just coming from teams that are trying to get Tetairoa McMillan to fall to him, but it just kind of is what it is. Speaking of Tetairoa McMillan, we did our this or that when it came to McMillan and Jayden Higgins in the second round. Feel similarly around McMillan. If you feel really good about him and those questions that are popping up, you know better as the NFL team than the public knows, great. Take him at number 9, absolute home run. He's your star player for the next 10 seasons. But if you don't feel so comfortable with that, or there's a better player on the board for you available at number 9, Iowa State wide receiver Jayden Higgins, fantastic. Absolutely good compliment. Good route runner as well. sits down in zones, finds the open area, understands how to utilize his leverage, big bodied as well at 6'4", 200 plus pounds, good blocker, contributes all over the place. Just one of those guys that absolutely loves the game and is that unique blend of height, weight, speed, athleticism, all of it, in a massive catch radius as well. So Jayden Higgins, another big time win for you. How about a running back like a Travion Henderson out of Ohio State? Does everything. Rusher, catcher, or receiver rather, blocker as well. Great in pass protection. And yeah, he comes in at 5'10", 202 pounds, but that's not bad size for a running back. And he plays a lot heavier than that 202, 208, 210 pound frame that he carries around. The thing that I also really, really like when it comes to Henderson as well is that what you get from him is a guy that has done a whole lot on the offensive side without a lot of tread, with still having a lot of tread on the tires, like right, not so much wear and tear. Averaged just 147.5 carries over the course of his multiple seasons over at Ohio State. So has a lot of tread left on the tire there. Let's go to the top of the third round. Let's go back to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a lot of promising prospects in this year's draft between Jaxson Dart, Trey Amos, Tre Harris, JJ Pegues. Like there's so many of these guys coming out of Ole Miss this year. But let's say you want to go with a wide receiver in the third round because you went with Will Johnson in the first. And then let's say maybe you go with Travion Henderson in the second, or a defensive tackle, whatever, right? Build the trenches a little bit. Then Tre Harris out of Ole Miss in the top of the third round. This dude was awesome. He led the nation in receiving yards per game with 128.8, just an absolute playmaker. Has that go up and get it mentality at 6'2", 205 pounds. The thing that I like about Tre Harris is the same thing that I like about Luther Burden, but you get more size with Tre Harris. But the thing that I like about both those guys is that they just have that attitude of I'm better than you. And oftentimes they are. Oftentimes they prove it. Tyler Rowland and I over at Locked On NFL had a conversation about that today on today's show. I love that attitude at the wide receiver position. Mason Taylor, the LSU tight end. We know all about him, right? 6'4", 240, 250 pounds, ran a 4.65, good speed, good blocking ability, all around player. NFL pedigree as the son of former Miami Dolphins defensive end Jason Taylor, who was one of my favorite Madden players ever. I got him on every roster that I made over on the old Madden games. Mason Taylor. Now I'm all excited about Jason Taylor. Mason Taylor coming out of LSU, obviously great selection if you don't go tight end early. And you're not necessarily a big fan of the tight ends late, although there are still some good tight ends late. We'll break those down in future episodes. How about Indiana defensive tackle CJ West? This is our first time really digging into the trenches here, but we're going to do it back to back. Early round 3 guy, not the biggest dude, 6'1", 6 foot, but he is around that 300-pound area, just really disruptive in the run game, as well as showing some flashes as a pass rusher as well. Really good round 3 guy, 9.14 RAS, 40 combined tackles with 8 for a loss last year. That was him after making that leap from the MAC to the Big Ten, still kept up that production. And then finally, late round 3 guys, Georgia offensive lineman Tate Ratledge, or you can throw in Jared Wilson here out of Georgia as well. Just physical, but also good blend of of size and athleticism. 6'6", 308 pounds, moves extremely well, has a high RAS score, ran sub 5 second 40-yard dash. Blend of schemes that he's a part of when it comes to the run game, and is an excellent pass blocker as well. You got Dillon Gabriel, who you feel pretty good about here in 2025, but you don't have a solution at 2026 and beyond when it comes to that left guard spot. We talked about that earlier. Drafting for the next many years, not just for 2025, and Tate Ratledge can certainly help you there. And then I'll wrap up here with Kansas State running back DJ Giddens. Explosive, breakaway speed, but has the toughness to run through contact between the tackles, can pick up blitzes, can catch the football, would be a fantastic addition to the New Orleans Saints running back room, which still has Alvin Kamara at the top of it, but has questions about what it's going to look like in the future. And I think DJ Giddens could be a really, really intriguing prospect for the New Orleans Saints to help to advance their running back room. I have several more of these over at LouisianaSports.net, so go and check them out, and we'll continue to break down more here on the show. One thing that I didn't name in any of that was a quarterback. And we broke down quarterbacks that the Saints have already been attached to or connected to, but isn't it a little suspicious that there are some quarterbacks that haven't even really been mentioned? I think so, and I'll tell you why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints have been connected to just about every quarterback in this year's NFL draft, and the noise has been really, really loud, which is a little, how do I want to say this? Unexpected for an uncharacteristic for the New Orleans Saints. It's a lot of noise around this. And I wanted to highlight, I said that they've been connected to almost every quarterback. I wanted to highlight some of the quarterbacks that they really haven't been connected to this offseason, because if I'm being honest, I think it's a little suspicious that there are just some of these guys that aren't a part of the conversation nationally when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. We've watched every other top quarterback continue to be connected to New Orleans and beyond, not just top guys. We're talking about some of the later round guys too. Quinn Ewers and all the connections around them, having dinner with him before his pro day, top 30 visit. Scott Tolzien going over to work out with Syracuse's Kyle McCord, put him through a private workout. We've seen them connected to McCord, to Ewers, and then also top quarterbacks in the draft. Shedeur Sanders, of course, out of Colorado is the big push right now. I still don't buy it, if I'm being completely honest. Not that I don't buy him. I think me, Ross, thinks that Shedeur Sanders is a fantastic talent. I'm not so sure what to believe around the New Orleans Saints right now because, and this kind of sets up where I want to go here, but look, Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe, like they've been connected to all these guys, right? But one of the things that I highlighted in an episode either earlier this week or last week, I can't remember, but recently, was the Dion tease. I like these colors, blah, 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 all that stuff. In case you missed it during the broadcast of the Colorado Pro Day, Deion Sanders was hinting very heavily at the colors of Colorado being black and gold. And of course, he didn't say ever the New Orleans Saints particularly, but Adam Scott over at the Saints Block Party podcast asked him specifically about the potential of Shedeur Sanders, the Saints, and whether or not he likes it. And one of the things that he said was, I like the colors, right? Black and gold for both of them. And then during the broadcast, he also went on to highlight black and gold, just saying black and gold. And then Louis Riddick was kind of backing that up with like winky, wink, wink, and like all these other things. It was fun. It was good. But here's the thing. Too loud. Too much noise. It doesn't make sense. I'm not convinced because you don't, like, for what? For what? Why do that? Like, if the Saints are in on Shedeur Sanders and you're excited about Shedeur Sanders going to the New Orleans Saints and the prospect of that and everything like that, then don't put the Saints on blast so that everybody can try to Patrick Mahomes them, right? Kansas City Chiefs them, like back in 2017. Ironic that we were talking about that 2017 draft class actually earlier. And so I still am convinced more so that Deion Sanders' comments about Shedeur Sanders' interest from the New Orleans Saints really all comes down to trying to stop a slide. That's my expectation right now. So we'll see where things go, but I don't buy it. So because that's too loud to me, I got to wondering, is there something about too quiet? Like it's quiet, too quiet out there? And so I wrote down these three quarterbacks where I haven't heard a thing, with the exception of one. Shout out to New Orleans.football, but we'll get to that here in a second. Because I want to start off with a player that I've heard no connection to the New Orleans Saints with at all, and Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard, 6'4", 216 pounds, good size for an NFL guy, projected to be like a 5th to 7th round, kind of late day 3 player. 66% of his passes completed last year, 21 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He also ran for 17 touchdowns, though. So he put together a total of 38 touchdowns last season on the way to, I guess we'll just call it a very successful season for Notre Dame, right? And so the pluses around him is that he's an elite competitor, big-time competitor. Really good pocket mobility as well. My concerns with him is that he's too quick to run. He reminds me, and I'm not just saying this because he was with Notre Dame. He was with Duke for 3 years before he was Notre Dame, all right? So I'm not just saying this because he had a gold helmet. It reminds me of Ian Book. Like that was the Ian Book issue too, was that like everything was pressure, everything meant run. And I think Riley Leonard has the same thing, and he really lacks both deep ball power and deep ball accuracy. So those are some of the big things there. So if I'm thinking, okay, so why is this NFL-sized quarterback, like perfect size for an NFL quarterback, not on the radar or not connected to the New Orleans Saints. And then I get to too quick to run. The organization has seen that already. And then I get to a lack of not just deep ball power, but also deep ball accuracy. You got to be able to throw the deep ball in the NFL. You don't have to live and die by it, but you got to be able to do it. And I think some of the accuracy stuff is raising larger questions than just down the field as well. So I can see why Riley Leonard maybe isn't getting the connection to the New Orleans Saints. I buy it. Louisville, Tyler Shough. And yes, it's pronounced shuck, like shucking an oyster. So already perfect, right? Are we done? Are we finished? Good night, everybody. Thank you. No, but this is a guy that I was saying, shout out to New Orleans football earlier. They put him in a mock, and I think it's starting to like create some conversations and stuff like that. But it is really interesting how quiet everything is around Tyler Shough, even though he's getting first round buzz. He's the quietest quarterback I've ever heard get first round buzz before, outside of maybe Davis Mills. And the Davis Mills one ended up, he finished 5-19-1 in his career and didn't complete 63, but 62 point something % of his passes throughout his career. And he's a clipboard guy, and that's fine. But he also didn't end up going in the first round. I don't think Tyler Shough goes in the first round, but there's a lot of kind of whispers around it. So it separates Tyler Shough from Davis Mills. Okay, day 2, second, third round makes perfect sense for where Tyler Shough could potentially go. 6'5", 219 pounds, 214 pounds. He is an NFL-sized player. He will be 26 by the time that the NFL season begins. This is where he gets one of his big knocks. But here's the thing. Maturity at quarterback is not scary to me. I'm not worried about that if you're 26 years old. Yes, you still can develop. It does not matter, right? I'm 35 and I learn every day. What are the pluses? Fantastic processor. Reads the field completely. Full field reads, already very comfortable with that. Great arm strength as well, and good accuracy as well. Good ball placement, nice touch, all these other things. That to me was a big separator between him and Davis Mills. Davis Mills, I didn't feel like had that touch and the ability to be able to say when you need the ability to be able to determine when you needed to loft a pass or put a little spit on it or gun a pass in. The velocity or changes in velocity of Tyler Shough's throws based on situation, I think, are solid. Here are the concerns with him. Poise under pressure. He's got a disgusting rep at one point where he's like getting pressured and he just kind of like underhand throws a ball in a panic. You cannot get away with that in the NFL. You cannot get away with that in the NFL. So poise under pressure is absolutely got to get cleaned up. Injuries. Durability. 2021 and 2022 seasons ended early both times thanks to broken collarbones. 2023 ended early with a fibula injury, broken fibula. However, played every game here in 2024. So he doesn't care about the age. He doesn't think that the injury history is big, but how do teams feel about it? We'll see. 62.7% completion percentage last year, over 3,000 passing yards, 23 touchdowns and just 6 interceptions. Not much of a runner. That's okay. Pro-style passer in the NFL. Shough's really interesting. So why is it so quiet? Good question. Oregon's Dillon Gabriel, very quiet there, and I can tell you why immediately. 5'11", 205 pounds. If you know me, we could stop the conversation here. Too small. Size concerns, all those other things, huge. Great dual threat guy. Elite production, 189 total touchdowns in terms of his over the course of his career. He holds the FBS all-time record right now for passing touchdowns with 155 in his career, but too small. Great touch, great durability, too small. Lacks arm strength, third level potential, and is too small. It stinks, but I calls it like I sees it when it comes to that. Day 3 guy, 72.9% completion. It's crazy. Like if this dude was 6 inches taller, we'd be talking about him entirely differently. But in the NFL, too small. And we've seen it over and over again with teams. Yes, you can name your 4 exceptions if you want to in terms of short quarterbacks, but then the rest of history tells you otherwise. All right, there you go. So I don't know. I can see why Dillon Gabriel's on a list. I can see why Riley Leonard's not getting a ton of shine. But boy, is Tyler Shough interesting. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, I want to dive more into round 4 for the New Orleans Saints. And of course, we'll keep you up to date with everything you need to know, including an underrated pass rusher that I don't think I've ever talked about on the show that I can't wait to tell you all about. We got that coming up for you in tomorrow's episode. We appreciate you very much as always. Make it as a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.